This video is sponsored by DOOMLINGS. Painting trim on models like Chaos Space Marines and the like can be super fiddly and frustrating. Well, stay tuned, because in this video I'm going to show you a few hacks and tips to get that pesky trim painted with little to no drama. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now, I've painted up my fair share of miniatures over the years, but I've always found models with different coloured trim to be the most time consuming. I mean, there's two options that I used to go with. Do you paint the armour, let's say Black Legion for instance, you paint all the model black and then slowly pick out all the trim, which seems to take forever? Or do you do it the other way around and spray the model gold and wash it and dry brush it and then pick out the black after that? I mean, that also takes quite a lot of time. Well, both have their pros and cons, but I think the latter is probably a little bit faster, and I'll come to touch on that in a paint guide very shortly. But first, I have a super quick way of painting Chaos Space Marine trim. I mean, it could work for most Chaos Space Marine schemes, but it's perfect for Black Legion. So let's just jump straight into that one. So for this Chaos Space Marine, what I'm going to do first is start off with Death Metal. So what I'm going to do is just load up a dry brush, get a bit of paint on there, classic, wipe it off on some tissue paper. I mean, you can use wood, card, whatever. I like to use some tissue paper. And then it's just a matter of just gently flicking it over all those raised areas. Doesn't matter if you over heavily apply it in places, that's okay, because, well, we're going to cover those later anyway. It's mainly for the trim here. So all you need to do is just go around and then just dry brush that over. Obviously make sure you pick out as many of those raised areas as you possibly can as well. Just work your way around and take your time. Then we're going to move on to a slightly lighter gold. This is, again, concentrating this on the trim and raised areas, and this is tainted gold. So again, just work your way around doing that. Then I'm going to get some Grim Black. Now this is a speed paint, you can use a contrast or whatever. So I'm just going to load up my brush. You can thin it down. Sometimes if you thin it down a bit too much, that's fine, it'll still run into the cracks. But what I'm going to do is just go over the actual panels in the armour. Because it's quite watery, it's going to flow into all those cracks. So it's going to give me a nice sort of like, I guess, line around all the areas anyway. So there's very little chance I'm going to get it onto the actual trim itself. Because it's quite runny, it will just spread around and just makes your life a lot easier. Now it's gonna still look a little bit metallic, but I'm okay with this because this is the speed side of it. It's Black Legion, but it's got like a little bit of a metallicness to it. But I'm okay with that. That is sometimes the compromise of trying to do something a little bit quicker. You just gotta, you know, go with the flow. You not get stressed out about the fact it's a slightly different looking black. I mean, who says they don't have metallic black armor, right? Next up is to start base coating the other details. So I'm going to start first with the leather. So that's things like the holster, pouches, belts, anything that's like straps and stuff like that. So just work your way around picking them out. Then the cloth or flayed skin, if you like, depending on the colour scheme you're picking really. I'm just going to use some red here because the Black Legion, I think it's quite a nice spot colour really. And you've got a couple of like tatty bits on the shoulder pads as well. So I'm just going to pick out all the red bits using some Basilisk red. And if you do make any mistakes, you can tidy back up after. Then any silver details, pick those out with gunmetal. And then just for the eyes, I'm just going to drop in some pure red, just so it look a bit more menacing. Then I'm going to get some dark tone and coat that all over the model. This is going to do a couple of things. Firstly, it's just going to add a little bit of extra punch in those recesses. It's going to knock back that metallic black a little bit as well, so it'll be a little bit matter when it dries. And also it's just going to shade all those other details like the straps, the cloth, etc. Then just do some tidying up. Again, just go around those areas that you've already base coated and washed, just pick those out. This is like your first highlight almost. And then it's just a matter of doing some highlighting if you want to. This is not necessary. This is just some, I chose just to do it on the red here, just to make it punch out a bit more. Didn't bother with the leather, but I thought it'd be quite nice just to do this on the red. And again, if you make mistakes, you can just tidy back up those previous colours. And in some places you might find some of that gold is just a bit more subdued or not quite as punchy as you like. So just get some tainted gold and just touch up some bits that look a little bit sorry for themselves. There we are, our first Black Legionnaire is done. Although a little bit dark in places, I'm okay with this. It's really speedy to do, and this model took me less than 20 minutes to paint up, not including the base. Now next up is a more traditional way of painting Black Legion. This is the way we used to do it in the studio, so as opposed to spraying in black and doing all the trim, which took forever. We're going to do it the other way around. I'm going to start with the trim colour, and this could work for silvers as well, so you could spray it silver instead of gold. And all you're going to do is do some washes, some dry brushes, and then just pick out the actual armour after. It's how we do it in the studio with the army painting team, and in comparison to the more traditional way, it's actually quicker, but still not as quick as the previous guide I've just shown you. But before we talk a little bit more about painting trim, Here's a little bit from today's sponsor. Doomlings is a fun, light-hearted and quick game where you focus less on the doom and gloom of the apocalypse and put more effort into having fun. It's quick to set up, whimsical, but also very strategic. Aimed for 10 plus ages, but even a 7-year-old can quickly pick it up. Though easy to learn, it is hard to master and infinitely replayable. I just need to get better and beat my lad. He's already smashed me several times into oblivion. It's embarrassing, really. The object of the game is to score the most points by the end of the world. You score points by playing trait cards from your hand. Play traits over rounds called ages. Each age introduces a new rule to the game, like no green traits this round, etc. But be warned, hidden in the ages are catastrophe cards, which unleash adverse effects on the game. When the third catastrophe strikes, the world ends. Players then tally up their scores to see who won, which usually isn't me. Christmas is around the corner, so why not grab yourself a copy of the game and see the year out with an apocalyptic bang. And if you use the discount code Peachy20, you'll get 20% off your order on doomlings.com. So instead of watching and listening to me tell you about it, why not grab a copy and bring about the apocalypse on your terms? In a fun, light-hearted kind of way. So this time around, we're going to start from a gold undercoat and apply a wash all over. So the approach to the trim is slightly different to the last one. So just coat that all over. It doesn't matter if it's quite thick and goopy in places. You can just move it around once it's applied. If you do find it gets a little bit bubbly, that's also fine because it does just spread out and turn back into liquid. Then what I'm going to do is do a dry brush of silver. So I'm going to do this all over. Again, this is going to be highlighting all the trim. So like I said, slightly different approach to the last one because we want a nice bold gold. A nice bold gold. So again, as you just work your way around and keep building up those layers, you'll see it just looks a little bit more punchy. Then very much like the previous version, what we're going to do now is get some grim black and we're going to apply that over the gold. You could just get like black and thin it down slightly. I prefer to use speed paints or contrast because they're super runny and they kind of flow into the cracks and kind of colour all the lines in for you. As you can see here on the leg. As you can see, it just flows in and then just stops at the edge, which is great. As it starts to dry as well, you will notice it gets a little bit darker. Here it kind of looks a bit silvery. It's kind of got almost like Iron Warrior vibes, but I will need to do a second coat just to be on the safe side, which is what I'm doing now. So you could, if you want to do, just keep it to one coat, which will look a bit more like an Iron Warrior, like I mentioned. But yeah, the second coat will just add a bit more depth to it, make it a little bit darker. And again, it might have some metallic vibes, but again, I'm fine with this. I'm not bothered because it's about speed here. And sometimes you've got to make those compromises. Then we're just going to base coat those extra details. So picking out the cloth like I did on the last one, same colour. It's pretty much using the same colours here, really. And work your way around onto the shoulder. So anything that you want the cloth to be, whether that's flayed skin or red, and then any leather details as well, so I'm just going to pick those out. And of course, don't forget the casing on the gun as well. And if you are base coating and do find you accidentally like slip and get a little bit of silver or red onto those black areas, just apply a little bit of grim black over it. Wipe it first with your finger if you can get it quick enough, but most of the time a couple of coats of grim black will hide it. And if you did find that you get like a few bits of black or whatever on some of those gold details, I'm just going to go around with some bright gold. Granted, it won't be highlighted, but actually in the grand scheme of things, you've got lots of things that are highlighted there. It's not going to be that noticeable. Unless you really care about it, then go around and highlight it. That is also an option. Then it's going to be coating it in dark tone. Again, very similar to the last approach. Doing two things here. It's going to add some depth and shading to all those base coat areas. It'll also tone down that black so it's not as metallic-y and to make it a little bit darker. And also just in some places add a little bit of extra depth to that gold because it was quite bright and in your face. And there's our second Black Legionnaire now done. A little bit brighter than the last one. Took a little bit longer as well. I think a lot of that is just picking out that grim black in all those panels. A little bit more time consuming, but you get a brighter gold. Right, so as you can see, this one was a little bit more time intensive than the first example, but really it's a good way of getting that desired colour for, let's say, your Black Legion. And also, if you want to do things like Thousand Suns, just drop the black and put like a blue in there instead. You could also change your undercoat, like I said before we started doing the guide, whereas if you wanted like word bearers or something else, you spray it silver and do washes and dry brush and then pick out reds or whatever. So really all you're doing here is just using the trim colour as your main undercoat, washing that, dry brushing it, and then just filling in the gaps, which I'd still argue is quicker than the more traditional way that I used to do. And probably a lot of you get hung up on as well. I mean, we all want our trim to look smart and clean and crisp, but it's chaos, isn't it? So just think outside the box and make life easy for yourself. That's what I do. Now, what I'm going to do next is move on to some Stormcast models. One, because I wanted to paint some Stormcast models. And two, they have trim of their own. But also, I wanted to do a slight different vibe which is using thin paints to do your trim instead of like using just normal paints from the pot. So we're going to use some speed paints here. So you've got the metallic speed paints, and then using things like yellows and ochres to represent golds as well. So the first one I'm going to do is a silver Stormcast, and we're going to use just a contrast or speed paint to make it look metallic. Interesting. Let's try that out. Now for our first example, I'm not going to presume anyone has a coloured or a metallic spray, so I'm just going to start off with a black undercoat and then dry brush the desired colour over the top. So that's what I'm doing here. I've got some nice gunmetal, just heavily dry brushing that over. That kind of works in another way as well, because I'm going to get myself some shade in there already from that dry brush. So in all those nooks and crannies, there's going to be lots of dark black details. So another option if you don't have any silver spray. Now, a really quick and simple way of getting yourself some gold trim is to use a contrast, or here a speed paint, and find a nice yellowy or ochre colour and basically apply that on the areas you want to be gold. Because of the metallics underneath it, it will give it a metallic finish, which is really, really nice. And it also shades it as well because it's a bit dark in those recesses, and just generally looks quite nice. This is something a lot of painters do at the moment, where they just use like yellow or ochre tone to give themselves a nice gold finish. And then if you have made any mistakes, just go around and tidy those up. So if you have accidentally splodged or went over the lines, then just get some silver and tidy up. Really straightforward and quick. Now, because both of these elements are going to be metallic, it makes sense to highlight them both at the same time. So I'm going to get some lighter silver, shining silver here, and then just do a nice soft dry brush all over. So that's going to highlight both the silver areas, but also those gold areas. And it will also make them look more metallic as well. Then it is a bit of a slog now, so luckily Stormcast don't have like lots of black details, but you have got like some of the undersuit, belt straps. So I'm just going to pick these all out with black. I'm going to use grim black because it's a really nice colour, it dries really nice as well. So I'm just going to whip my way around. In some places you might want to do a second coat as well. Take your time and enjoy the process. And if you do make mistakes, like getting it onto like the armour or the gold, you can either just quickly wipe it off because it is quite thin and watery, or just tidy back up after when it's dry. Also decided, because I know he's going to have a black beard, to just paint the whole face black. And then it's just a matter of picking out the skin. And for this, I'm going to go for a dark skin tone. So I'm just going to use bootstrap brown, like I used on the leather details on those Chaos guys. And then I'm just going to get something called strong skin tone and apply that. That's going to give me a nice little shade for that dark skin. Now, one of the things I do like to do, I like to add a little bit of colour to my Stormcast. I could have just left him like this. I've not picked a particular Storm host here. I'm just having a bit of fun really with colour. And that's what you should do, have fun with colour. But I'm just going to go for that kind of like reversed highlighting thing that I've mentioned in previous podcasts and paint jobs and stuff like that, where I basically pick out the colour, but I don't go all the way to the edge because it looks a bit chipped, a little bit battered. It's almost like it's painted armour and it's been worn through years of service or fighting and stuff. Also, if you do splodge on that lightning bolt, don't worry, because we can tie that up in a bit. Also, some finger wiping looks quite good as well. Looks a little bit scuffed and a bit worn, but yeah, just generally have fun doing that. And then any areas that you just, well, like this lightning bolt, just pick that out with silver. And then I'm also just going to pick out some of those rivets with silver as well. And then also add some scratches in case my scratches weren't scratchy enough. Now, to make my hammers feel a little bit more magical, I like to add a little bit of a blue tone to them. So I've got something here called a Raging Sea. Again, any kind of light, sort of vibrant blue would work really, but I'm just using Raging Sea. And then I'm just going to do a quick dry brush over the top of that with a little bit of shining silver as well. If you want to, you can apply that to the red. And then you can get any colour here. I've just got pure red on my palette because I've used it elsewhere in this guide. Just going to apply that to those gems. With our first Stormcast now done, I really like this scheme. I do like lots of silver armour with bits of red. Again, just using a little bit of contrast or speed paint as your source of gold trim is really quick and efficient and saves a lot of time as well. This guy pretty much took me 30 minutes to paint up. Now, I really like using things like yellows or ochres, which are just normal colours, but applying them over a silver or metallic undercoat does give them that metallic finish, especially if you finish off with like a subtle dry brush of silver. That really does add to it as well, as you saw in the guide. This next one we're going to do now is, again, it's very similar, but it's using those metallic speed paints, which are really cool, actually, having metallic speed paints. But also, they are very similar to just normal metallics, just super thinned down, and I kind of cover that as well. But they work really good over a white undercoat or light undercoat, because as it dries, it kind of pulls away from the edge a bit, and kind of gives you a bit of a highlight as well. So we're going to jump into that now, and I'm going to do my favourite colour scheme, which is creamy white armour with gold trim. I love that. That works for loads of things. So starting from this white undercoat, what I'm going to do is get some golden armour. Now this is a speed paint metallic, which is really, really cool because they're quite thin like speed paints, but they're also metallic, which is amazing. You could actually just thin down a metallic as well. The bonus here as well is when it dries, that white undercoat will show through on the edges and give it a nice little highlight as well. So I'm just going to work my way around, just picking out all the areas I want gold. Again, it's going to look messy. Now, that's one thing I'm going to say about this paint guide. This one's going to be super messy because there's going to be a lot of random colours applied over a white undercoat, and that's fine. I know this because I've done a test model. It's part of the process. Expect that. So with the gold details picked out, I'm now going to go around and pick out all the black details. This is like the messy parts. There's going to be splodge in here. You're going to get this on the white armour. Fear not, we can tidy that up near the end. Again, anything you want black, like I've done with most of my Stormcast, pick out all the leather work with black, pick out all the undersuit with black. I'm probably even going to do the weapon halves black like I did the last one as well, just because it just saves on faff. And it's also speedy as well. That's another thing to bear in mind. Sometimes it's nice picking different colours for like leathers and like the undersuits and stuff, but sometimes it just looks cool with the same one as well. Again, work your way around and take your time. And also I thought, you know what, I'll do it on the face. I will thin it down a little bit more on the face just because it gives it a bit of a shade underneath as well. Talking of faces, we're just going to move around and just pick out that. I'm just going to use a normal paint here, no speed paint here. So I'm just going to pick that out. It's ruddy umber, and then just do a second coat if needed. Now here, what I'm going to do is going to get gunmetal, but I'm going to thin it down, a bit like the speed paint version, and just apply that over to show you the difference between the two, which you'll notice there's not that much difference. It's a metallic that's thinned down. Oh, yeah, don't forget to pick out those little gem casings. They're important. Now what I'm going to do here is move around and tidy up any splodges. Now the colour I'm using isn't the same as the undercoat. Most of the time it's not that noticeable, but in some places, depending on the colour you're using, it might be. So sometimes you can get away with just picking out the little bit here, a little bit there. But if it does look wildly different, then I would just do the section that has the splodge on it, because a whole panel would look better than just like part of it. Then I get some pure grime. I really like this colour. It flows really nicely. I do like the wash as well that Army painters do, but I'm a big fan of pure grime. I don't know, I just like the way it dries and flows. So I'm just going to apply that all over, and then once I've done that, I'm just going to get my brush and soak off any excess if I need to, because it will pool, especially if it races down to the bottom. Wash is what I call it. Work your way around. If there's any bubbly bits, soak those up. If it's really, really heavily pooling, try and get it, but don't worry if you don't. Then I'm going to get some bootstrap brown, and I'm going to do some chipping on that enamel armour. I'm going to say it's enamelled armour really. So I'm just going to work my way around, stab that on. I do actually really like this gold and white. Gold and white together look great, or cream, or off cream. Enamel, that's what we're going to go with. So yeah, just work around, chipping. Now you can see some pooling right at the base of the greaves there and the boots and stuff. That's fine because we can heavily chip that if you want to. Also, I'm going to use some of that bootstrap brown and just go around some of those rivets to add a bit more definition. And in some places between where the gold meets the white, it might not have a nice enough bridge, so you might just want to like drop in a little bit in the cracks there, or do a second coat with a wash. It's entirely up to you. And add some chips as well, some extra ones, some bigger scratches. But what I'm going to do now is hide some of that pooling at the bottom and turn it into weathering. So I'm just going to do some dry brushing around the boots where it just looks like, you know, they've been walking across the desert or muddy ground or whatever, cake some dust on it. That's a really good way of hiding some of that if it pulls too much, if you've not spotted it. Wipe with your finger to show some highlights. Our final Stormcast member. Again, I'm a big fan of white and gold armour, or off-white. Using the speed paint metallics, again, did speed it up a lot. There was a little bit of faff picking out a lot of the details, and the tidy up stage did take a little bit longer, but actually the end results speak for themselves. Now, this particular guide was a little bit more time intensive than probably maybe the other ones was. Most of that is down to just neatness, really. I'm quite a messy painter though, and I know the end step where I do all the tidying up, that's where it all comes together. So I tend to not be so concerned or stressed about that, because I know I can tidy it up. And that's the great thing. Once you've got those gold bits of trim done, you've blacked all the like undersuit and the leather and stuff like that, just get that white or whatever colour you're using and then just tidy back up. And that's something I want to also throw back in there as well, is I kind of didn't really mention this in the guide section, is if you have an undercoat but you have a colour that's close to it, it is worth probably just thinning down that colour before you start painting, and then just like coat all over the undercoated model with that pot of paint colour, because that will then mean if you're making any mistakes when you tidy it up, it will be a better match, a perfect match. The spray I used was Ashen Grey, which is the Colour Forge signature series, and the closest colour I had was Brigade Grey, which is still slightly lighter. So really what I should have done was thin down that Brigade Grey, apply it all over, then start doing the gold trim, doing the black bits, because then when I did tidy it up, it would not be as giant, but like I said, you can just do a whole panel like a knee pad or like a tasset or a shoulder pad. It still works just as well, but just something to bear in mind when you are doing that, because a lot of the Citadel sprays don't match the actual pots. A lot of the Colourforge ones do, which is great, which is why I'm always singing the praise of the Colourforge, because they actually match the Citadel colours, which is mental. So it is worth just doing a thin down coat beforehand. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little video about painting trim, and there were some useful snippets and tidbits you can get from it, whether that's like a little hack here and there. Bear in mind as well, I know I focused on Stormcast and Chaos Space Marines in this, but it kind of works for a lot of things. Space Marines, just don't have to be Chaos. It could be Space Marines as well. It could be Imperial Guard. It could be historical stuff. It could even be vehicles as well. So there's a lot of things that you can use this guide for, really. So, and also, if you have any useful ways that you do trim, do drop them into the comments. It's nice to see people discussing and throwing in their ideas and how they save time or find like little hacks here and there. So do chuck them into the comments. And as always, I can't leave without saying thank you to my beautiful, beautiful patrons. Here they are, a bunch of them going by. It's a great community. We've got a great Discord. If you ever considered supporting the channel, do jump over to the Patreon there. The Discord's also really good if you have lots of questions about random stuff, whether that's 3D printing. I'm always tapping into my patrons because they're all super intelligent people and have lots of advice on lots of different things. And it doesn't just have to be painting. It could be life in general. So great community, lots of lovely people, all willing to help. And just, you know, if you're having a bad day, most of them will make you feel good because they're beautiful, beautiful people. I've talked a lot about trim at the moment, so maybe I should go and have a run, get a bit trim, maybe do the lawn as well, and probably need to shave my head as well. There's a lot of things right now that are just flooding through my mind with the word trim. So I probably should just go and do something about that. Basically, tidy yourself up, Peach. Tidy up your garden, tidy up your hair, tidy up that waistline. Come on, mate. Stop eating that cake. I can't help it. I love cake and bourbons and chocolate. I mean, Christmas is around the corner. Got to put on that extra insulation to keep myself warm during the cold winter months. And I really like cake. Christmas pudding, Christmas cake, Stollen. That's pretty good too. Oh my God. It's not going to be great for my teeth on my waistline, is it? Oh well. You know, I only live once.